Okay, we still have folks coming in, and we're going to let everybody get settled, find a seat. And remember, hey, just kind of as an advisement for everybody, whoever you're seated close by is where you're going to be in small groups with. That's who you're going to be in small groups with. So you can see a small group here, you can see a small group there. So 3 or 4 people in that small group. And so, just so you know, so if you see someone who looks incredibly cooperative, you may want to hang out with that person and see how that goes for you. Okay. All right. They closed the door. There may be others coming in. Okay. So, just a reminder: this is being filmed by Longmont Public Media, and yes. And so, does anybody have big issues with if you are filmed and recorded by what you say? Is that going to be something that you're not going to want to happen? Because Eric, who represents Longmont Public Media, will be the person doing the recording. Anybody have concerns? Okay. I missed that. Okay, did you see that? Okay, great. All right, well, listen, thank you all for being here. I'm Mike Butler, one of the co-founders of the School of Statesmanship, Stewardship, and Service, along with Carol Engelin. We founded the school about 3.5 years ago, and a number of months ago, Eric Wallace, the owner of Left Hand Brewery, and one of the best craft brewing breweries in the entire country, who has attended some of our classes, many of our classes over time, we got together and we decided, hey, let's put something together. This is the political season. It's starting to get into that political season, and I won't name names, or I won't say who's in the room or not in the room. You guys can figure that out. But we have former elected officials. We have people who want to be elected officials. And we may end up with, we've had people who are current elected officials in the room. So thank you all for being here. And so anyway, we decided to put together this series called Pints Perspectives. And by the way, we were going to call it Pints and Politics, but the School of Statesmanship, Stewardship, and Service is a nonpartisan entity. And we do our best to stay as non-ideological as possible as well. And so we don't get into the politics of everything. We're more interested in here's more people by the bushload here. Come on in, folks, find a chair.
Hey, students, sit in the front row. Not a mad game. You guys are scary.
Here we go. All right, so anyway, this series of 8, it will be followed by a series of 4. Carol, there's seats up here if you want to come up. And come on up. Sorry, you're going to have to be the good student in the front row here.
Break the barrier. Cheers.
Yeah. After 3 of those, the goodness might go away, huh? Okay. So anyway, and we decided, because we just decided to call it Pints and Perspectives. And that's where we're landing. And I just want to make it real clear that this is about you all. This is about the people, you all in the room. Now, we have our role with the School of Statesmanship, Stewardship, and Service. And Eric has his role with providing pints of beer in terms of what this is going to look like, in terms of what your adult beverage of the evening might be. But anyway, so that's where we're headed. And so the first night was about the economic and social cultures in our community. The second night was finding common ground in the many dimensions of environmentalism. Good luck with that one. But they did. And then tonight is about the service-mindedness and creating a service-mindedness culture in our community. And we're not here to say that culture doesn't exist at some level. And at some level, I'm also talking to the elected officials, to people who want to be elected officials, but I'm also talking to all of you. that is an incredibly important thing, that when you have 100,000 people in your community, that people really truly believe, no matter who they are, no matter what they represent, that their voice counts, their thoughts matter, and most importantly maybe is that their humanness is valued. And that's a big emphasis on the part of, I say SOSSAS, the School of Statesmanship, Stewardship, and Service. That's SOSSAS. That's what we're about. And we're trying to educate, teach, and bring awareness and consciousness to the idea that we need leaders. There's no question we need leaders. We just need them to show up differently in terms of that role, in terms of ensuring that the culture, the sense of safety, and that there's a welcoming format for everybody's voice in this community. And so these 8 sessions are often about that. So that's why you're the important people in the room. Now, I've heard the phrase all of us have heard great community. And are we a great community? And are we not a great community? And let me just say that in my mind, greatness is defined by the content of the goodness. Now, we heard of great athletes, we've heard of great artists, we've heard of great accomplishments, but let's make that our sense of greatness for tonight, and that is the content of our goodness. And that's another place where SOSSAS really thrives and thinks about in terms of what we want to teach. And so great community, how do we get to a great community? Is it necessarily the leaders in our community? Important. We need leaders, again, but we need them to show up differently. They're important people in our community, there's no doubt. Is it a matter of the services that are provided by the local government, that whether they're improved or really good? Does that make a great community? That they're important, but they're not the emphasis here. Or is it a matter of expertise, the amount of expertise you have in a community? The thing I will say is that expertise is important. And we just had a conversation up in Eric's conference room about how there are literally thousands of people in this community, maybe tens of thousands of people in this community, who have a level of expertise that goes unheard of, goes unused. And that potential is lost because maybe they don't feel like their voice counts, or maybe they don't feel like they have permission to utilize that voice. So we've often equated great communities with great leaders, greater improved services, or a higher level of expertise. We're here to say tonight that where we're coming from is that great communities are made by great citizens. And that's where we want to go with tonight, and that's where we want to end up with this 8 sessions. And then, by the way, the last 4 sessions are going to be Meet the Candidates. And there's already a group of us talking about what that's going to look like in terms of how do we, the people who are running for office, local office, and there may be several of them this time around, but how do we want to gauge them? How do we want to assess them? How do we want to kind of figure out whether or not they're the right people for the job? And so we're going to be working on that as well for those last 4 sessions. So I just want to go over this piece, the next one. Okay, you can't maybe not see the top of it, but I want to make it clear that your learning, your being here tonight, your learning is in your own hands. It's going to require your effort, your depth. Thank you, Eric. He just doesn't know how to make beer. Your learning is in your own hands. What you're going to get out of it, what you put into it. Your personal engagement, your effort, your depth and time, your participation and connection with others will be the centerpiece of all of these sessions. And so while we're up here talking, and oh, by the way, what I want to make clear, for those of you who've been here before, you know that we've done this, but we have 2 very special people in the room who are going to talk about what creating a service-minded culture in our community are going to look like, and we'll be introducing them later. And the other thing that we make clear for everybody, and people just don't necessarily understand, know, or believe this maybe, and that is we believe you're enough. You're enough as a person. You're enough as a neighborhood. One of the things in my own history when I was the public safety director in working with neighborhoods they considered themselves unsafe, and they would call the cops in and say, make us safe. That it didn't necessarily mean that the number of armed guards in that neighborhood paled in comparison with their social coalescing, paled in comparison. The more coalesced they were as a neighborhood, the safer they were, and in every single neighborhood that we worked with. And so what we would say is, you're enough, and so we'll help figure this out together. But I just want people to know that you're enough. And we come from the perspective in SOSSAS that everyone that we meet has this almost unlimited, infinite capacity. We say enough, but it's a lot more than enough. And so we want people to really, that's where we're coming from. That's where I'm coming from right now. When I look around the room and I see each of you, I see unlimited, infinite capacity in each of you. You may or may not realize that. You may say, well, I have all these faults or I have these deficiencies. We don't see people. We don't see communities as problems to be solved. We know there are problems to be solved. We all get that. But it changes the conversation and it changes our actions when we begin to see people, communities, as possibilities. It changes it dramatically. And so just keep that in mind, that that's where we're coming from. If we want to create a future that's distinct and different than the one we have now, we all do at some level. We may not know exactly what that looks like. And part of tonight will be trying to mold some of what that new future can look like. Then we're going to have to include many more people. We got to get out of the old models, the old templates, and kind of the old formulas of the leaders are what make great communities, or the expertise is what makes great communities, or the services provided make great communities, and that it's great citizens that make great communities. Our purpose is to shift thinking, excuse me, to consider the possibility of creating meaning. That's what these 8 sessions are about. Here's a tough one maybe for you. We're not going to ask you to evaluate anything, but we're not going to ask you to evaluate the presenters, myself, Carol, the 2 speakers we're going to have. That's kind of a patriarchal way of seeing the world. In other words, the night went according to how the speakers presented, how entertaining they were, how informative they were. We're going to ask you to evaluate the quality of your own personal experience. That's different, isn't it? You haven't been asked to do that in terms of evaluating a session you've attended. So this evening will be based on the quality of your own personal experience in terms of what you did, how much you contributed, to what level you're willing to stand up and say something. And so there you go. So what we're asking, what courage is required of me now in the room? What courage is required? The courage to be curious, brave enough to move beyond this moment, and to dive into the deep end and explore new possibilities. And you're going to have that opportunity to do that. Now, Carol has given you, I think, a couple of different sheets of paper. One are conversation guidelines.
I haven't given out questions.
Okay. Conversation guidelines, you should have a copy. Those are SOSSAS's conversation guidelines. They're ours. We put those together. And I went over those the first night, the first session. I'm not going to go over them tonight, but I would ask that if you have that sheet, is to pay attention to what's on that sheet and to look at it. And you'll see that really this conversation is not about you. It's not about me or Carol or our speakers. It's about you, but it's about the good of the whole. It's about the collective. That's where we're after. That's what we're after. Okay. The next sheet you're going to get here in a little bit will be indicative of, these are the questions that we're going to ask a lot your small groups to talk about. I'm not going to go over the questions now, but these are the questions that we're going to ask you all to talk about. These are your perspectives. If you came here thinking, well, I'm going to listen to somebody else's perspective, sorry. You're going to be listening to each other's, and you're going to be listening to yourself, and to remember you're evaluated on the quality of your own participation. So, again, we're going to dive into the deep end, explore new possibilities, and I hope to see you all there. So I'm going to turn it over to Carol. She's going to go over a few things, and we'll come back, and Carol and I are going to do a little, we'll talk about it later in terms of the format of our presentation. Go ahead.
Okay, so how many know, How many know kind of the factual data around Longmont? Does everybody know that? Pretty much? We have a population. Now, this is from Chamber of Commerce, 98,000. I think does anybody know, have we passed the 100,000 mark? We have. Okay. We have 28 square miles, almost 40,000 households. That's a really interesting, figure. The medium home sale, now don't anybody get upset or excited yet. We're going to have an affordable community kind of session on down the road, so keep coming every 2 weeks on Thursday night. The median home sale price was $625,000. 9,675 businesses. Think about that. A lot of small business in this town. A lot of big business in this town. Beautiful. Our city and county state sales tax is 8.72, and almost half of us have a bachelor's degree or higher. Wow. You all want to say wow? Wow. Wow. That's exciting. And I asked AI, so I don't know if this is correct. Of course, we all have to kind of question AI. I asked AI how much green space we have compared to our city limits. They said, AI, my co-pilot, said 2,500 acres, almost 13% of the city area. Now, I think there's a lot, for those who know what's happening in the city, I think that's starting to expand. And that relates back to 2 weeks ago when we were talking about the many dimensions of environmentalism. You're hearing it all over the place. I come from a design background and design thinking. So it's like, how do we design that into the future, right? How do we start to think about collaborating and working that into the future? All right, I love this chart. This is our households distribution by income. All right? So, and age. I think there is, and for me also, there was Longmont's an older city. I used to live in Boulder, and when I moved to Longmont, people said, well, you might as well move to Kansas. I said, well, thank you very much. I'm from Kansas. And what does that mean? And it was I moved over here and I found the most valuable, wonderful community of people who were friendly and caring and diverse. And so look at this. We have our poverty issues, and we can talk about that as well. We can talk about that around affordability. But we're pretty well kind of in upper middle class along all age brackets, right? Now I'm going to ask you the next question. What do you think is the highest target age group in Longmont? Somebody kind of, like the highest percentage of age. 55 and over. And that's the common story, is it not? Wrong. We are a young community, and we're very well diversified across all age groups. We are balanced. So when we talk about goodness, and we talk about how to make this place like the best community in the state of Colorado, or the best community in the United States of America, this is where we start. We start to think about all of us being included. And I would say, having worked at a university for 20 years, I would say we need to invite and welcome, thank you, younger generation, the X's, the Y's, the Z's. Thank you so much for coming. And bring, oh no, well, I have alpha and beta grandkids, and I'm doing this for them, right? I want to make the next generation, I want them to have the best. So just look at that and know we're a very balanced community. Now, this is growth around a lot of surrounding areas. And you can see that we have steady, sustainable, manageable growth. Some of the other communities around us are going to go like this, and they're gonna hit some walls around that. You can look at Johnstown, moving from 10,000 to 20,000 in 10 years' time. You can look at Lafayette's a little higher. Meade, look at Meade. And of course, we know what happened. They did some land expansion. They grabbed up some of the farmland. But we're in steady growth. It's good. I'm telling you, goodness exists right here. So what do we need to do to grow our community into a little more excitement? We talk about goodness all the time. This is, I put up my own slide, and then I asked Copilot. I'm like, really, will you make me a slide too? And Copilot did, the goodness spectrum. But I can tell you, as a researcher of networks of people coming together and sharing knowledge, and that's what I did at the university. And I got the science grants. I got the science of organization. But really, it was about people coming together and saying to each other, you want to come along? I'm going to invite you. Or let's work on a project, just like Eric did. I remember when he walked into we were at the museum. He's like, I want to do Pints and Politics. And I said to Mike, Pints and Politics, we're non-political. Like, what do we do? And we came up with a perspective. You know why we use the word perspective? I come from a design background. Told you that already. Guess what? No one in here has the same perspective. I don't care if you live in the same house, if you share every meal and every night and everything you do, you have a different perspective on the world than the person sitting next to you. You know why? Why do you think? Different backgrounds, okay? Okay, so we came from the same. I came from liberal Kansas. It was middle class. You know, everybody knew each other. Okay, so if it's somebody else came from liberal Kansas, what else? Different experiences, right? Different books, different teaching, different studies, different genetics, different everything. The beauty of a community is that we have, in this community, we have over 100,000 beautiful, unique perspectives. Well, that's interesting as we come together. So let's look. Communities flourish when individuals embrace positivity. This is from the research, guys. This is what happens. You feel better if you're positive. Has anybody had a couple of negative weeks? Did it affect you physically? Yes. Did your nervous system go off? Were you a little more antsy and anxiety-driven? Anxiety means, the original slide said anxiety equals unreasonable fear. It is without evidence. Being with Mike Butler, he will always say, where's the evidence? He will always say that to me. And I've had to learn, go do the research. Innovative solutions. Rather than this slide also said, no complaining, no condemning, no criticizing. Instead, we create, we collaborate, and we work together to collect each other's perspective, this individual perspective. A culture of creativity. Now, I can talk a lot about creativity, and I can talk about it from the neuroscience part, that when you are creative, you are not in this adrenal system, you are in the parasympathetic nervous system. It's a good thing. You feel better. You're hopeful. And transforming problems into opportunities. What can we do today? What can we take a look at? And then how do we create something that's different for tomorrow? This is from service-minded culture that happens within civic engagement and civic management. Co-creating, inclusive, outcome-driven, and storytelling. How do we spread that goodness? How do we spread that news? The benefits of service, and we're going to talk, we have John and Doug with us tonight. The benefits of service are that you are improved. Our health as a community is improved. Our well-beingness is improved. We have social bonds. When you are a friend and you are personal with each other, you can no longer fight and battle and argue. You have to learn how to collaborate and work together. And that you will grow as a person, as a human being. Your skills will develop. So just think of that as we get into our thing. We're going to talk with Mike about Q&A.
Sit down.
Okay.
We're only going to take about 10 minutes here. These were some questions that part of the evening goes that schools.
Microphone.
Part of the evening goes where we're going to take anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes to talk about what SOSSAS offers in terms of the teaching. Now, the School of Statesmanship, Stewardship, and Service has 45 courses attached to its curriculum. And we teach a variety of skill sets, from harmonizing the contrast to connecting dots in complex environments, to becoming a partner with evolution, to how to ask powerful questions, to how to have conversations that are transformative, how to actively listen. We talk a lot about the neurosciences. We talk a lot about community engagement. We talk a lot about service leadership. And so if you're more interested in any of this, let us know. But anyway, just a short little segue into our speakers.
Okay, and we decided to do this little podcast. We have been recording podcasts on a weekly basis, and so we've gotten into, hey, I ask a question, and he answers, and I interrupt him along the way, okay? And you may too. So we're going to create this service-minded culture. What does it mean? What do we do? How do we do it? What is it?
Well, I'm going to let this group answer some of that tonight in my short-winded response to this. But for me, it's done through invitation. You were all invited to be here. No one, I don't think anyone was forced to be here. You all came here on your own. We talk a lot about the power of a quality invitation in our school, and we did a lot of inviting. When I was the public safety director, I did a lot of inviting, not only to our staff, but to our community. And by the way, one of the things that we did was we went out into the neighborhoods. We did invitations on people's front lawns, their driveways, their living rooms, and we made these invitations very personal. So there's a lot more to that. But one of the initial conversations I think we all have to have as leaders, and I'm speaking to either current or future elected officials, is leaders have to get good at invitation, making invitations, getting off the bandwagon of mandating, forcing, or legislating. Oftentimes we think we can legislate solutions to a lot of the complex social and health issues, and I've not seen that happen ever. It's as if more legislation or stiffening a penalty will serve as an insurance policy that's going to protect us from the human condition. Never seen that happen. But invitations can be very powerful in terms of people feeling like, you know, my voice counts. They can also say no to the invitation. And so anyway, invitations are important.
Okay, so how do we create more of a culture in Longmont with service-minded people?
Well, first of all, we have to start with ourselves. If you want to see something shift, and part of what I wrote about in that editorial is, if we want to see something shift in Longmont, we can't sit there and say it's someone else's responsibility. You have to embody. You have to be the change you want to see. So if you want to see a more service-oriented culture, it's up to each of you as individuals. None of us have a template, a formula, a way of doing it that says there's going to be mass kind of shifts and changes. That hasn't happened in evolution. Evolution's slow. It's effective, but it's slow. And so the challenge to each of you, the invitation to each of you is, if you want to see Longmont become more of a service-minded community, that means you have to change. You're the one that has to embody that. The other thing, in terms of working in this community for as long as I did, is that, and being in this community as long as I've been, is that there's already a service-minded culture. There really is. But I also know that there's literally tens of thousands of people in this community that don't know if they have the wherewithal to provide any kind of assistance, don't know if they have permission. They may have been told by the experts, and wherever those experts might come from, know that we're the ones with the answers. You just kind of sit by and watch us work. Or they don't know if their gifts are going to mean anything to anybody. And so one of the things that Dan Benavides and I used to walk neighborhoods in this community, and one of the things that we discovered was that everybody we spoke to had gifts to offer. And by the way, just about everybody wanted to offer those gifts. They just, again, didn't know how. But the big one was they just didn't even know if they had permission because they thought someone else was going to take care of it. So the embodiment, the personal embodiment, one wise man said, maybe a long time ago, said, be the change you want to see in the world. That's how we become a service-minded community.
Yeah, I don't know why this screen keeps shaking. Does anybody know? Just a lot of good vibrations happening up here. Okay, all right. So who is responsible? Is the city leadership or the city councils? Are they responsible to create the culture? What's going on with that?
There is responsibility on the part of leaders. There's no question. But I'm going to keep on saying we do need leaders. We just need them to show up differently. In ways, one of the other skills that we teach and talk about are how to create a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. You've all heard that phrase, but we don't know necessarily what it means. And most leaders that I've encountered really don't know how to do that. They don't know how to create a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. How do you begin to harmonize all the contrasting parts? How do you begin to ask questions and have conversations where all these parts can be? Because we know what good teamwork is. We've seen teams in our own, whether they're our work teams, athletic teams, we've seen what puts one team above the other, and that's that sense of social capital that exists amongst all those team members, where they truly believe the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and somehow they came up with a coach or a leader that said, your part's no more important than anybody else's part. And so for me, it comes down to that.
All right. I'm gonna move to what do you believe keeps people from seeing their gifts? How many of you believe you have gifts? How many of you believe you can give to your community? All right. So what precludes them from offering and giving their gifts to others?
Well, and by showing up tonight, maybe that's part of it. This is a variable that we can't account for in terms of you being here. And I know a number of you in the room have had positions in this community or have had certain amounts of officially sanctioned power, whatever that might look like, that truly believe that your role made a difference and you have some experience. But I can assure you, there's thousands of people in this community that don't believe that. And so for us, this comes down to that invitation. This comes down to that sense of creating the culture, the environment in which people really truly believe, and I'll say it again, their voice counts, their thoughts matter, and their humanness is valued.
All right. We're going to move to our two special guests tonight. John Creighton. I'm going to have him come up first. John, where'd you go? So John's very special to us, especially in SOSSAS. He's the CEO of High Plains Bank. He serves on the board of Longmont Downtown Development Authority, the Education Foundation for the St. Vrain Valley, and the Imagine Foundation. He's past president of St. Vrain Valley Board of Education. John and his wife, Joni, have called Longmont home since 2001, where they raised their children, Emma, Joe, and Grace, Ada and Grace. All of whom are proud, I need my multipliers, all of who are proud Jayhawks. So I just say a lot of good things come from Kansas, you know. John is a graduate of Kansas University and Harvard's Kennedy School. Now, John was our seed. He gave us the first funding to get SOSSAS off the ground. And so he's very, very special to our story. And if you've been around this community, you know what a great person he is. And he's going to speak to what he feels service-mindedness is in Longmont.
Great, thank you. Just want to say thank you to Eric and to Mike and Carol for organizing tonight, and including Doug and I in this. And as Carol mentioned, I'm with High Plains Bank. We also have from High Plains Michelle Hovdeson here. Michelle embodies our approach to community work. And then Sam Creighton and Joni Creighton are also here. Our bank is 117 years old. We've been in Longmont for 13 years. And within the first few weeks that High Plains Bank was open in Longmont, Doug Ward, who will be speaking next, enticed me to do something I never imagined I'd do, and that's to get into a tuxedo and conduct an orchestra. So I appreciated that opportunity. What I wanted to talk about is the culture of service from a business perspective. And, I would submit for communities to be healthy that you need businesses that lean into service. And too often now, and it seems like it keeps increasing, that we think service and business are two separate things, rather than being something that businesses can do. And that's why it's so easy for some businesses to jettison projects that they're doing when the political winds change. I mean, there's businesses that strive to be socially responsible. In one direction or another, the politics change and they drop that program and do something new. That's kind of service without conviction, I would suggest. And that's one of the things that I really admire about Eric and Left Hand have leaned all in to this being a community where everyone can afford to live, everyone can find a home. And it's a passion he wears on his sleeve, and it permeates his organization as well as his personal life, and just as a great role model. What I would suggest is that for businesses to really kind of think about what does it mean to be a service-minded business, there's three questions that a business has to sort through. The first question is, as a business, are we here to do business in the community, or do we strive to be part of the community? And you can recognize those folks very quickly, the ones that think about it differently. Those that are just here to do business in the community, if you ask them to participate in service or something like that, their first question is, what's the return on investment? What will I get out of this? Whereas businesses that think about the community's needs as one of the factors that they consider in making all business decisions, they weigh those community factors along with other things that affect the business. But they're not separate from one another. They're one and the same. The second question is, are the acts of service that we're doing as a business, are we being performative? Are we doing it just so that we can be seen? Or do we strive to have impact regardless of whether someone notices or sees us or not? And so again, you can kind of see a consistent theme here. If you're just doing business in the community, you want a return on investment. And so to get the return on investment, you need to be seen. And I will say that, in our organization, we have a lot of folks that are part of our organization. They contribute, they volunteer, they serve on boards, they're at events. All those things are very, very important. Communities wouldn't function without doing those things. But oftentimes for businesses, they can have far more impact doing things that are part of their core business as opposed to something that is separate from their business or something auxiliary to their business. An example, kind of a world-known example of this is Patagonia, which really leans into everything it does trying to be sustainable. What's great about that Patagonia is their CEO says you can't make clothes and be sustainable. So we're actually trying to be the least impactful in that sense, as opposed to pretending that we can be something more than that. And so I really appreciate that kind of authenticity. Another example of that is I was at a conference last week with a number of businesses from all over the country, independent businesses, just a wide range of industries. And many of them are now taking the step to be a public benefit corporation. This is different than a B Corp. A B Corp is a certification you get. It's a logo that you get. As a public benefit corporation, you don't necessarily have a logo or something that you can put on your website about that. What you're doing is you're putting into your bylaws what you want to be publicly accountable for. And so that when leadership changes from one generation to the next, the bylaws would have to be changed for that company to step away from being publicly accountable for certain benefits. And then the third question, and I think one that's particularly important right now, is as a business, do we have criteria for who we consider to be part of our community, or do we try to embrace everyone who's in this community? And we see that over and over again. During COVID in our industry, this great moment of need for small businesses. Many banks said, if you don't have deposits of a certain amount or certain types of accounts, we can't help you with the Paycheck Protection Program. As opposed to saying, who are the people in our community that are in need, and let's do everything that we can to help them. So other examples is, in many of our communities, we have 4 branches on the Eastern Plains as well as being here in Longmont. And many of our communities are dependent on immigrant labor. And because of the way banking rules work, oftentimes the immigrant labor is put in a position that they feel like they can only do things in cash, which is not necessarily a safe or effective way to be doing things. What our team researched is that it actually is possible to open accounts for folks, even if they don't have a tax identification number, if you're not paying them interest, because the I-10 is to report the interest. So we are able to help 200 additional immigrants get bank accounts as opposed to doing everything in cash. And so that's where I'll end here, is that a lot of times there's a little bit more than you can do. We often just think, I just can't do that, that's too much. But if we just really look hard and we think hard, there's always a little bit more that we can do. And I think that's the challenge to all of us, is what's that next thing I can do? Thank you.
Thank you, John. And we're going to introduce Doug Ward. I'm going to let Carol do that. But before Doug comes up, I just want to say that the business model, or the model that John has referred to, is one, there's a profit motive. There's no question you have to be in the business to make a profit motive. You're employing people. You're making businesses happy. You've got a lot of overhead. But there's also a service model as well. And what Eric has done, what other people in the room have done that own businesses, and what John has done, is they've been able to integrate that profit and that service motive. And so they understand that there's a profit to be made, but there's a service to be provided. And you guys have done that very well. So thank you, John. And again, I'll just echo what Carol said. Thank you for your support of our efforts as well. So, all right, I'm going to let Carol introduce Doug Ward.
All right, Doug, you want to come up? So, if you probably have seen Doug, if you go into a Longmont outdoor concert, he'll be the one greeting you. Or if you walk into the symphony, he'll be the one at the door taking your tickets. Or if you go to the Hour Center and drop off some things, he'll be there. He is a full-time, service-minded citizen. And he moved here with IBM. Where'd you move from? Northern Utah. And so he's been here for 39 years, worked at IBM for 39 years, decided to retire, and chose to become a full-time volunteer. Now, I am going to talk to some of the older people in the audience. What are you doing with your retirement and your leisure time now that you have support, some stability? How are you giving back? What are you making a difference in your community? He retired to get involved with the Colorado Energy Sciences Center. I don't even know what that means. And the Boulder Energy Conservation Center. But you see him in Longmont at the Hour Center, at every civic kind of activity, and the LCJP. And I love that he herded Cub Scouts. I think John also has a very big Scout tradition. So welcome, Doug, and just tell us about being service-minded.
Thank you. And full-time is an overstatement. There's a few hours a day is all.
Hold it close to your...
Hold it close here?
Hold it close
Closer?
to your spit in it.
You know, I've wondered about these entertainers that sing, you know, and they go, "Hey," so I noticed one thing. I noticed that the lowest category representation in population is 81 to 84,
Yeah.
1.7. How come we're the lowest?
I don't know.
I mean, if you get through that at 85, you're double that. Yeah. You understand that, John? I don't know. So in thinking about this, the thing that struck me is that, and interests me, is creating, and Carol used the word social bonds. This idea of creating social bonds one-on-one was something that just kind of stuck with me. So I'm gonna talk a bit about things that I suspect most, if not all, the people in this room are doing, but point out why it's impactful. So I'm going to start with somebody who just greets you in passing on the street, complete stranger, makes eye contact, and smiles or nods or maybe says good morning. The person who's the recipient of that greeting, research has shown, for the next hour they're impacted. They have a little dopamine. Oops, got my notes here. Thanks. The young guy picks up the notes. So for the next hour after that little dopamine hit, people feel better, even though they don't even recognize it. It's just some passing person said good morning, right? Further research showed that it can be cumulative over time. And so there's interesting studies. One of them, they got someone to volunteer who gets off, I'll just say gets off a train, same train stop every morning, goes to work, and then walks a distance to work. And what they set up in the study was someone who would greet this person just offhand. It wasn't something that happened the same time every day, might happen in coming, might happen in going. And they did that for 3 months and had them journal what their feelings were. And so they were getting maybe once or twice a day, just in passing, a stranger said hello or smiled or nodded. After that 3 months, when you went and looked at the journal, gradually over time the person would say, this place is actually friendlier than I remember it being, right? And I arrive at work for some reason. I arrive at work not feeling as stressed. And the other one that just kind of surprised people was people would say, it's maybe about time I got involved in my community. So think about what your impact could be as you walk down the streets in Longmont, just pass a stranger and make eye contact and smile and nod, right? You're having an impact, just at a very simple thing. Curiosity, connecting with curiosity. Monica Guzman wrote a book about I never thought of it that way, and the punchline of the book was he and her parents couldn't even talk to each other because she's a raging liberal and they're a raging Trumper. And so after 2016, they couldn't talk about anything except, oh yeah, the turkey looks good this month. So she loaded up a busload of her most liberal friends who lived in a county where 75% of the people in the county voted for Clinton, took them over the border into Oregon, into a county where 75% voted for Trump, and they spent a day together, and the only criteria that they had to abide by was unbiased curiosity. Unbiased curiosity. Just listen to the farmers and ranchers talk about what it means to be a farmer and rancher, the risks, the rewards, the impacts, and that kind of thing. At the end of it, the busload of people went back, and she reports it was like electricity for 5.5 hours. These people couldn't quit talking about this relationship they established. How long do you think it lasted? About a month, right? So she talks about how do we be consistently curious. Yeah.
Closer to the mic.
Whoa. Well, that presumes I'm saying something that people want to hear. So, but I thought this thing about curiosity and an example I have is I have a friend who has autism, And the manifestation, it's called a stimmer, I think. It's the movements people with autism might do. And his was rocking. And we were having a discussion one time, and he said, I wish people would just ask me about it. I'd like to just be able to just say, here's what it is. It's called stimming, and it's the body trying to balance stimulus. And people with autism, it doesn't balance the same way as normal people do. He said, I'd just tell somebody, So have the courage to ask. I had a couple of experiences just today. I was headed out biking, and I saw an older woman walking on the sidewalk. And for some reason, I thought, I think I'm just going to stop and say hello. So I kind of stopped. I said, for a 45-year-old, you're moving pretty good. And she says, you're half right. She's 92 years old. And she had on a T-shirt that said, top of Long's Peak. And so I thought, I'm going to congratulate her. Oh, you made it to the top of Long's Peak. She says many times. She lived actually somewhere close to the trail to Long's Peak. She said it was, they just get off and go to Long's Peak. That kind of connection. I went away feeling good, and I think she went away feeling validated, a little bit. And another example, it just happened today. I haven't seen Rick Stoner for probably several years. And Rick had really bad health, and I stopped in once when he was, he just about died, with his infection. So I'm going to go see Rick Stoner. So we had a conversation this afternoon, and I asked him, what's changed? What caused you to, what have you had to do? And he says, well, I've had to quit doing three-dimensional kind of art. I can't, handle it with my hands and I can't think, pardon me, hands any longer. But he's still painting, and he's doing good. So just when I got ready to go, he said, just thanks for dropping in. It's just nice to see you, So just to have a little bit of curiosity. The third kind of example is having risk. I was standing in the parking lot of Safeway talking to a friend of mine from IBM several years ago, and there was a young woman kind of moving around asking people for money for a meal. And she was headed our way, and asking for money from me is no, there's not going to be anything there, because the only money I have is when Karen gives me $15 for breakfast on Friday. So it would not be a donation I make. Anyway, she comes up and she says, do you have any money to share? And so I'm thinking, what am I going to say, and wondering what Shirley's going to say. Maybe I should say, I can give you the address for Hope. What would she do? And she turned to this girl and said, if you can stay for just a few minutes, we're about done. And so the girl stood around there for a few minutes while we wrapped up. And then Shirley turned to her and said, I've never been hungry. I don't know what that must feel like. That must be really hard to be hungry. And the girl said, yeah, it really is. And so Shirley said, I won't give you money, but if you'll walk into Safeway with me, I'll buy you something to eat, and if you'll tell me about your life. And what I know about Shirley, as well as she and her husband were like a saving crew, right? This would not be the first time they'd reached out and tried to help somebody and connect them with services they'd need. But it took a bit of a risk, right? Maybe the girl's on drugs, I don't know, or was having a come down or whatever. But she went in and sat down and listened to the girl's story while she ate. So have the courage to make a connection in a risky situation. This last one, you may think this is absolutely ridiculous, but years ago in 2001, when the war in Afghanistan was not going well, it looked like we were falling into a swamp over there, and it just concerned me. And so, anyway, sometime in that early period I was having a call with a tech support or customer service or something somewhere, and when he got done, the fellow said, "Is there any more than I can do for you?" And I said, "Let's work on world peace." And there was this kind of hesitation. I thought he's sitting there thinking, this guy's a nutcase. And when he came back, his voice had changed. There was a connection, an aspirational connection that came up in that moment. So in 20 years, I do that every time. Embarrasses my wife to heck. we'll be at a restaurant and the wait person will come up, anything more, and I'll say, let's work on world peace. And invariably people will say, oh, well, wouldn't that be lovely, in a different voice. The voice of connected aspiration, I think maybe you could call it. I've only had one time when it kind of went awry, and I'd taken my car in for service, and I was paying the service manager, and he says, anything more I can do for you? And I said, yeah, let's work on world peace. And the guy behind me said, I hate world peace. So anyway, all of these things I mentioned are things that you do, but when you do them these days, maybe do more of them, just think about the impact that maybe you didn't even realize was there when you passed a stranger on the street and said, good morning. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you to both of you. And I think I've said this in a couple of other settings, but I've known both of these men for a while, and neither of them seek any kind of fanfare in terms of the service. And sometimes you swore Doug came in triplets, like Carol was trying to say, in terms of how often you see him in the community. And not a thing, he doesn't ask for anything. And I know John's still working, Doug's still working in a different way, but I want to emphasize this sense of that leisure time that we have. That leisure time in our minds is a form of social capital. It's a form of capital that says, I can do something to make a difference in our community. I can do something to make a difference in someone else's life. And some of us have a little bit more leisure time than others. Some of us are working. There's the practical aspects of economics in terms of paying what we have to pay for. But there's a lot of people in this community, and that's where we get to that point where if we can create an environment and culture where people really believe that their voice counts. You know, one of the other things I wanted to say that we discovered on these walks that Dan and I took were what they told us was, this is the first time, or this is maybe the first time in a long time that I felt needed, that I felt wanted. And that is so important for people, to feel wanted, to feel needed, to feel that what they can do can make a difference. And we heard people say, well, if you have an event, I can make cupcakes. And so we invited that person, and they made bakery goods for the events that we had. Then we ran into people who said, I'd be happy to put someone who's unsheltered into my home because I have this big home and I'm living here with my spouse or by myself, and everything in between. People need to feel needed and they need to feel wanted. And so whatever we can do to help people feel that way, to help people feel recognized, appreciated, valued, and that their gifts, and Carol asked earlier, how many of you know about your gifts? That's a conversation that leaders typically don't have with those that are leading, or people don't have with each other. But that conversation around our gifts becomes important in terms of, well, here's your deficiencies is how we kind of operate, or here are your gifts is another way we can operate. And so seeing someone, as we talked about earlier, as a problem to be solved, or seeing someone as a possibility. Two entirely different conversations, two entirely different sets of actions. Okay, again, we want to have a little Q&A. If you have any questions or thoughts for John and Doug, before we start answering some questions, if you don't, fine. I think they're incredibly articulate, incredibly authentic. I'm privileged and honored to know these men, and I know a number of you know these men. But if you have any questions of John and Doug in terms of what they said, or maybe something that you want more information about, please raise your hand. Please raise your hand. Got somebody? Anybody? Okay. Carol, save me.
What do you see as the best thing happening in Longmont right now? And what do you see as a trend in Longmont around the people that you work with?
Just in the last 2 weeks, in different, I guess in each of the organizations I volunteer with, Our Center, Recovery Cafe, and Bright Collaborative, which is now, there were people in meetings that said, I used to live in Boulder, like Carol said, I used to live in Boulder. came to Longmont for business, and it was just, there was a vibe of personal connection. I just felt welcomed here. And so I moved to Longmont, like Carol did. So one of the things I think is people sense what is happening here, and it's good, and they're drawn here.
So we have a lot of 20 and 30-year-olds that work with us at the bank, and they're remarkable. There's a narrative, I think, about young people, about being uncaring or self-centered. And the group of folks that we have the opportunity to work with, they're fearless on taking on challenges. They're optimistic, and they just bring tremendous energy. So I'm just very bullish on the next generations, and just can't wait to see them taking on decision-making roles in our communities.
Okay, I want to follow that up. So how can we tell the story about Longmont better? How can we get the word out?
I'm going to give it
to I think the story of Longmont's being told really well. I mean, I think to Doug's point, people know we're here. They know that this is a great place to be. The word's out. I think the challenge we face, again, to connect it back to the younger folks that want to be here, is will we make space for them? And will we create opportunities for them not only to have jobs here, there's a lot of opportunities to work here, but will we create opportunities for them to live close enough that they can actively engage in our community? So really, it's not a get the word out, it's open the doors wider.
I think I'd add to that as many of the people I run into end up getting involved because somebody they know invites them. So I think if we share the word, when people we come in contact with us said, I think I ought to get involved in doing something. Say, boy, have I got opportunities for you. But invitation, I think, is a big factor.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions that people have? Anyone has? Yes, I'm going to have you speak up. And I'm going to go with the guy with the pink plaid, and then I'm going to go with the guy with the green hat. So.
Yeah, what do you guys think is the best kept secret of Longmont?
Best kept secret.
Yeah, well, keeping a secret for me is no problem because I can't remember what happened yesterday. So.
Yeah, I don't think there's any secrets. I think people want to be in Longmont. This is just a place that people want to be and they want to engage in. So I think Doug makes a good point. Just keep inviting people.
Maybe a great symphony.
Great symphony. I don't know how many of you folks have talked to people who have moved from Boulder to Longmont over the last 5 to 10 years. And at one point, they all thought like what Carol said, boy, if you're moving to Longmont, you might as well move to Kansas. And the people who I've spoken with who have moved from, I'll just, not picking on Boulder, but from Boulder to Longmont, basically said Longmont's one of the best kept secrets in the world. That's how they respond in terms of what Longmont has to offer families, what Longmont has to offer in terms of culture, environment, diversity, opportunities. They couldn't believe it. They all had this sense of Longmont that was different. So that's been my experience in terms of people who have moved from a community like Boulder to a community like Longmont. The gentleman with the green hat, speak up.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for taking my question. I have just one short comment and one maybe a little longer comment.
Do you need a mic? Do you need to come up here with a mic? Look what you talked yourself into.
One short comment and one longer comment, but they'll both be short. When my wife and I first moved here 13 years ago, we were sitting in the left-hand brew area there. We were tasting one of these excellent beers, and the bartender at that time, he was a guy about our age, And we said, boy, this is really a cool town. It's got a lot of things going for it. It's 13 years ago. And he says to me, he says, yeah. He says, don't tell anybody. Well, somebody told somebody. But anyway, my longer comment, Carol mentioned that over 50% of us here in this community have bachelor's degrees or better. And looking at this crowd, probably 90% of this crowd has a bachelor's degree or better. And I would say to you, if we're going to get creative, there's a mantra that I like to repeat that's in the back of my head, and it's going to, you have to be willing to read, and with a bachelor's degree, you can probably do that. You have to be able to think. And that one's a little tougher because you have to be able to get critical about what you've been reading. But after you go through that critical creative process, then you need to execute. And that is probably the toughest step, because I know just from my own experience that sitting at the kitchen table with my wife at breakfast, I can tell you all kinds of creative things. And I could tell her a lot of creative things. But we never move it off that kitchen table. And that is the tough part. And I don't know how to do that. I don't think I can give anybody, myself included, any advice on how to do that. But if we can read and we can think, and then we can take the next step and execute, I think that we're really going to get the job done.
So before you leave, what's your name?
My name's John Bauer, and
Thank you,
I love Longmont.
All right. I love Longmont.
He just put a plug in for 2 weeks from tonight. We're going to talk about sustainability and resilience, and it's going to include design thinking. We're going to talk about how the design process, so when you have that creativity on the kitchen table, what happens next that starts to put it in process, and why it's not a perfect process. Because people think it has to be perfect before you start something. And that's not the way the world works. You have to kind of experiment and prototype and see what works, go back, reformulate. We're going to have people here talking about that around urban design, how to think about building something more. And come with your ideas. Come with your creative ideas over the next 2 weeks. Think about what you'd like to see 15 years from now, 20 years from now, when your grandkids, your children, your great-grandchildren come. What do they want to see along the riverfront? What do they want to see along Main Street? What do they want to see in terms of green space? And I just want to say, I walk Jim Ham every morning, and everybody I meet at Jim Ham Park tells me, don't tell anybody about this place. It's the best kept secret in the state. It has the best nature, the best birds.
And this gentleman in the plaid, I didn't get you. What's your name? All right, thank you. Thank you for your. And then, okay, in the back. Go ahead. Question? John.
The answer to this question, Longmont, best kept secret, Longmont has the best infrastructure in the Front Range, probably in Colorado.
Beautiful.
People don't understand that, but it's accurate. It's true.
All right. Thank you, John Caldwell.
We'll be talking about that in session 7.
Yeah. Yes. All right. You got to come back. Yes, Michael in the back. Speak up.
It may just be me, but I feel there's a little bit of an intergenerational tension between the older. If I look at the crowd right here, I'm not seeing a whole lot of 15, 20, 25. And I decided decades ago that in living out the years I have left, I would make it my moral responsibility to try to do what I can to make a more prosperous, livable world for younger generations. So the question is, what do you see as the opportunities for older generations to embrace the opportunity to pass the torch
Okay, Michael, here's what I'm gonna make a personal invitation to you. Are you open to that? Okay. Why don't you invite 2 15 to 20-year-olds to the next session? I'm sure you know somebody, so you can ask friends. Steer me to a 15 to 20-year-old person. Invite them, and if anyone else wants to take up that personal invitation, feel free to invite a 15 to 20-year-old or a 25 or 30-year-old to this room, and we'll begin that conversation. So, invitation, invitation, invitation. Yes, go ahead. I'm going to give you the mic because you're close.
So when things started tonight and at previous sessions, there was talk about the elections and leadership and seeing some evolution or a different word perhaps in leadership for the city. And I've been to some city council meetings, and during the public's right to speak and what's on the agenda, it's very, very complicated. Nothing seems easy. You bring up one thing and there's a reason why it's not happening, because this is happening over there, or it's not budgeted, or the planning is not in place, or it's not being followed. Anyway, you two gentlemen up there who are guests tonight, if you could give one or two things that you would suggest leaders focus on besides affordable housing, besides rail link-ups, besides green space, something besides what we hear every election cycle from the candidates.
Thank you for your question. I'm going to give this to John first.
Beyond the other issues, I think it's not a public policy issue, but I do think that there needs to be a concerted effort to build on what Mike's been talking about, Carol, Doug, giving invitations to people to be part of our decision-making groups. And, decision-making happens at many, many levels. But if you're part of a committee on a nonprofit, who have you invited to be part of that that hasn't previously been part of that? And you're going to get a lot of no's to things. But just making it a habit of trying to invite people and invite people and invite people, because it is, and the research does bear this out. Why do people do something? Because someone asked them to. And, this room is, not as skewed, age-wise as I might hope it was coming here tonight. And I think we just really, all of us, need to make a concerted effort to invite somebody younger than us to be engaged, so that they know that they're welcome and that we want them to be part of it. I know there's a lot of people in this room, my age and older, that started making decisions for this community in their 20s. And they were at the table making decisions in their 20s. And so what are we doing to bring the 20 and 30-year-olds into the decision-making process is the thing I would focus on.
Haven't got an answer.
We're working with another community in Colorado. They sent out 1,800 surveys to their high schoolers and young adults. And the results back were 78% had never been invited to a civic activity, to an organization. They didn't feel a part of the community. And so I'll just say, Laurel Ritchie is here from Twin Peaks Rotary. I'm going to call out on her. She's taken some of our classes. We're working on a youth citizenship project right now that will launch in October, where we engage the youth actually with the community. And so if you want to be on that train, let us know, because that's a big question, and it's a great question. And working with college students for 20 years, They didn't feel like they had a say. They didn't feel like they had a voice. They only knew they could protest or be activists. They didn't know they could be involved and be decision makers.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, one of the things that we talk about in SOSSAS is, and one of the things that we're working with across the nation, SOSSAS is working with cities across the nation, is how to help cities that are unhealthily dependent on services or expertise or government or leaders to become more interdependent. What's that look like? What's that process look like? We're actually teaching those kinds of how to make that transition on that continuum from unhealthy dependency to healthy interdependency. And what's that look like can look a lot different. And the gentleman in the green hat said, you know what? Get beyond the creative design, get beyond the talk, walk your talk, figure out what that looks like. And I will tell you with SOSSAS, I'll just give you a real small example. It was a kitchen table conversation, and it was like, okay, what do we do? One step at a time. And 3.5 years later, there's something here that wasn't there 3.5 years ago because we kept taking steps. And so tonight's one of those manifestations. And so any other questions? Any other thoughts? All right, your turn. Your turn. I want one more hand for these fine gentlemen. Thank you. All right, we're going to ask you to kind of form in small groups now. You're in rows right now, so you guys, I'm not going to tell you how to do it. You're going to have to figure it out. 3 or 4 people, maybe 5 at the most. Carol's got some questions she's going to pass out. So start forming. Okay, 1 more minute to form. We need form, then storm, then norm. Okay, here we go. Carol, have you passed all those out yet? No? Okay. And maybe this is a good time. If you want to go fill up your pint, please do. Yeah, we will. We'll get to that point. I just want to see. We will get back on a subject matter. Okay. All right. So Carol's passed out a list of questions. Carol has passed out a list of questions with some pencils. Okay? And here's the question we're going to have you answer first. Here's the question we're going to have you answer. And we're going to go through these questions one at a time until we're done. So that's where we're at. Okay, everybody, let me have the voice here real quick. I want my power back here, all right? Okay? So here's where we're going to go. Here's your question. The first question is, what in our community are you grateful for that perhaps has gone unspoken? What is one thing, each of you need to answer this, one thing in our community you're grateful for that has gone unspoken? Now, Carol's passing paper out with pencils. You can write these things down. Be quick about it. You don't have to take a long time to think about it. So one thing in this community that you're grateful for that has gone unspoken. Begin. 10, 9, 8. Okay. All right, everybody. Let's come back to the center of the room here, and I want to hear some reporting out. Huh? No, yeah, stay right where you're at. But just I can as much as this mic will let me, because this is not a cordless mic. This has a cord to it. So anyway, but I'm going to go with this group. Melinda, are you the spokesperson? Okay.
So the things we're grateful for that perhaps have gone unspoken is Rotary was one. Another one was the high expectations of the volunteer organizations that we do have. There are very high expectations of them. Water rights, parks, children playing in the street in neighborhoods, Latino community, family values.
Let's give this a round of applause here for that group. Thank you. All right, I'm gonna move around the best I can here. Go ahead. The person who has the paper has the mic.
All right, great. We had neighbors. So we were all in the cohort of people that moved from Boulder and came here, and definitely echo that sort of knowing of the neighbors and just openness of like and kind of welcoming vibe from neighbors and neighborhoods. The first thing I noticed when I came to Longmont was just like wide streets and big trees, which kind of I guess speaks to infrastructure and also just like kind of the space and slowness, the contrast there. And then lastly, we just talked about like the kind of respectfulness of the people in the community that we've experienced.
Thank you. Another round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. All right, I'm running out of cord, so you're going to have to come to me.
We had Longmont's good at helping those that can't help themselves, especially at the Hour Center. The Rotary Club's youth exchange program, that there's lots of really skilled labor in Longmont that can be helpful for many different tasks. And then I believe it was the Times Call has a good area for where you can get involved.
Beautiful, they do. Thank you, thank you. Gordon, why don't you come on up here? I'll give the mic to you. There you go.
We listed water, resources, small town feeling, diversity, and the social services network such as Hope and Hour Center.
Beautiful. Thanks to that group back in the back. All right. All right, I'm going to go over this group here. Who has the paper? All right. That doesn't surprise me, Jenny.
Okay, we are grateful. Oh, thank you, Eric. We're grateful for recreation, recreation, city staff, medical facilities, downtown street parties, yay, uniting lost pets on Nextdoor, no gang activity, and restaurants are starting to come back.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. All right. One more. Here we go. I'll get Mike won't come to you. You're going to have to come do it. There you go. Sorry about that.
And I'm talking into the mic.
Sure.
So we feel like we are a humble town and that we don't toot our own horn. We just sort of lead by example. And we have a safe avenue for people to go and have their say. You were talking about 6th Street over there. And even if you have a different political views, that it's still a safe place to say your opinion. We love the 4th of July here. It's a hometown feel. And now it's going into the area over there where you can watch the drones and the fireworks and everything. It's great. And we do like the symphony. And appreciate the city staff and the engagement of the town and the people, willingness to talk about the town.
Beautiful. Thank you. All right. Who's our spokesperson for this group? Who has the paper? All right. You're going to have to come to the mic. I apologize. You can say something to him later.
Okay. Ooh. We didn't write down too much, but we had great conversation. And the first one was what we loved about Longmont what was the first question? Grateful for Longmont. Marco's hot dogs. There was that. And we talked about how valuable the symphony is and how having the symphony at Thompson and now going to be at Roosevelt like it was last year, what a treasure that is that not everybody knows about. Give me one more. And also, we loved that we could have community groups, like the community group leaders within our city. If you have a leader, you can go to the city and they'll sponsor block parties and all sorts of stuff. And so that was really great. And anything else, group? And that's it. No, so that's
Good
it.
enough. Thank you all. Okay. All right. Next question, folks, for your group. This one's going to get, that was the softball question. This one's a little bit personal, and it's going to require some level of responsibility to answer it from each of you. And here's the question. It's on your page of paper. What declaration of possibility are you willing to make that has the power to transform your neighborhood or our community? I'll read it again. What declaration of possibility are you willing to make that has the power to transform your neighborhood or our community? So, talk.
Mike, do you want the group to agree on one?
No, you can come up. No, this is an individual one. If your whole group can agree on one, there is another question there that. Hold on a second. What can we create together that we cannot create alone? If you want to come up with one that you're all willing to work on, that's great. But if it's designed for the individual. So what declaration of possibility are you willing to declare that has that power to transform your neighborhood or your community? And I know people in this room that have done things like that. So game on, start talking. Here we go. Everybody's attention. We're going to start reporting out one more time here. And again, the rule is if you have the paper, you get the mic.
Oh, we have some great ideas here. Most of our ideas were related to the local environment. And they started out with an effort to get rid of gas-powered leaf blowers for a more peaceful environment. I added that. Is that okay? Also to stop using herbicides and pesticides on public lands. To eliminate turf from public lands that are not walked on. And so the idea of water conservation and beautification and all that kind of stuff. Is that a good summary? Okay.
Thank you all very much. Round of applause for that group. Let's go. All right, thank you. I'm going to go with this group next. Who has the paper? All right, here we go.
I don't have the paper, but all right. So we were talking about having more conversations on a smaller scale. So having more opportunities to listen more than we're talking. So having smaller scales and having Longmont public media broadcast for the people who can't participate in live. So just having a smaller scale conversation with our community members, maybe even adding additional representatives to our city. So right now we just have 3 wards. Maybe we increase that so we have better representation for our growing population.
Here we go. All right. You know, Alex, I didn't see a word written on that paper. Oh.
It's really small.
Okay. Okay. Well, then great memory. And by the way, I just want to comment. There are some folks that I know that are community organizers who believe that small groups are the way to go. And that's what you were kind of referring to. So thank you for that. Okay. How about this group right here?
Step out. Awesome. So yeah, we had a couple. We had an urban planner in our group who talked about like more complete neighborhoods that include all the kind of services and just different things that go into kind of creating a complete kind of neighborhood experience. We had the idea of more community gardens just to kind of facilitate community in that way. Just piggybacking on the idea of invitations and just like openness, so to helping participation. And then lastly, just kind of openness to talking to others and kind of overcoming, the resistance or friction that even like kind of introverts might experience to that, but just like kind of talking, even if it's uncomfortable, to kind of build empathy and community that way.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, you're going to have to come to the mic now. Okay, here we go again.
We were sort of thinking about what you asked at the beginning. In 15 years, what would you like to see? And the river corridor, the economics that you've already worked on and will continue to work on, and I believe I just saw a write-up in the paper about it. It's a big deal what's happening there. We want it to be able to have our children and ourselves be able to walk anywhere and bike anywhere safely from one end of the town to the next end of the town. And then we would really love to see more roundabouts so we don't get stopped by all the red lights. If you want more information, go to Freakonomics, and there's a great message there that talks about it. We would really like some hope about the train. And then just encourage more people to just show up whenever you hear about a town meeting, regardless of who it is. Just maybe tell one more person, and if you get more people to show up, then maybe these things can happen.
Beautiful. Thank you. All right. I love that last one. Okay. Who's the spokesperson for this group right here? All right. You're not getting out of it. You don't have any paper with you, but you know what you're talking about here.
Sometimes.
All right.
I hope it's this time too, but yeah. I think a lot of the things I've heard tonight about community were very nice and good and feel good, and yeah, we should do all those things. But I think one big part of community and to make our town better is, I think one of the glaring problems and issues we have in town is homelessness. And I think as a community, we need to come together somehow and figure out how to do this. It's a multifaceted problem with multifaceted answers, but that is hardcore community building would be to try and solve this issue. I believe it's just, they're everywhere. And once again, I'm not trying to demonize anybody or anything, but I think it will take a whole community, a whole city to try and fix this and figure it out. And it's not a sexy idea to get your hands dirty working and doing things to help homelessness, but I think it needs to happen. And I think that's what Longmont should do, to have a declaration of war on homelessness. That's what I think we should have.
Okay, before you go, what's your name?
My name is Matt. I'm an alcoholic. Sorry, wrong group.
What's your last name, Matt?
My last name? I'm Matt Brandt, and I'm better known as Heather Brandt's husband. So
Matt, I'm not going to let you leave, and if your group's behind you on this, here's my invitation to you. I would like for you, the invitation is for you to begin that process of pulling a community together. And what we will promise you from SOSSAS is that we'll help. So if Matt wants to take this one on, because I totally agree. So far, this issue has been relegated to the experts, to the system providers, to the government, to the elected officials. If we have homelessness, what are those elected officials doing about it? It's not going to go anywhere until what you just so eloquently said, the whole community gets behind it. And so my invitation to you is that if you want to begin this process, we'll help you. That's the deal, all right? Okay, thank you, Matt. See what you got yourself into? Okay. All right, this group over here.
Thank you. So our group talked a lot about some important and I think very effective leadership roles that individuals can have, and had some really great examples being on Boulder County elections officers, Boulder County Planning Commission, which I think sounds just undaunting. Being on the board of directors of nonprofits like the R Center, being significant donors to organizations that are providing services in our community. And then we tried to look at, besides just individual actions that we take in leadership roles or donor roles or whatever, the importance also of really encouraging others to come to the table, to not just think I'm doing my role, but to talk about it, to welcome people to events, and to not just do it once, but I think, as somebody well put it, you got to keep singing the song over and over and over, and they'll hear you eventually.
Thank you. All right. What's your name?
Margaret Norris.
Margaret Norris? Okay. I don't have an invitation for you right now. So thanks. Okay. You're off the hook for the moment, but I'll tell you, that was well done. That was well done. Okay. Last group. Gordon has the paper and has the mic here. Here we go.
Okay, we have a number of things that we have committed to. One is to organize and bring together a neighborhood that has been split by a number of issues. Second one is to keep a neighborhood organized and going after a bad situation divided the neighborhood. Another one is, as long as I am physically and mentally capable, I will be engaged in my neighborhood. And I personally have decided to be part of a block party organization this year for my community. And I think that's it.
Beautiful, Gordon. Thank you. I love the personal touch on all that. Thank you. Okay. You know, it's the time is getting later. It's 10 till. We were going to try to do 3 questions. We're going to keep it to 2. But I have to tell you, you have this list of questions with you. I would suggest that you hold on, make copies. If you're with groups of people, or if you lead a group, or whatever that might look like for this community, that you bring these questions and start asking them. And I think they're pretty good questions that get to the heart of some of these questions can create a little anxiety for the person. They're a little ambiguous. There's no yes or no. And so they're good questions to ask. And so hold on to them. And I think we're just going to call it for the night. It's about 7 or 8 minutes left. Anybody have any parting comments they'd like to make or anything that comes to mind for them? If not, that's fine. But yes, go ahead, Tom.
I'd add museum to the things to be grateful for.
Beautiful. Thank you. Museum is beautiful. I also want to say our camera person over here, his name's Eric, Longmont Public Media. Thank you, Eric. So I asked Eric about the first question. What are you grateful for, Eric, that maybe you haven't talked about or said to anybody else? And more or less what Eric told me is, I've been living here for 13 years, and I love this community. And the thing I love most about it, and I hope I'm not putting too many wrong words in your mouth, is it has such a high ceiling. There are so many different possibilities for this community. And he said it with passion and vigor, and he had no idea he was going to be asked that question. So that's Eric's answer. That was Eric's answer to that question. So, all right. Well, thank you all, and thank you for coming. Join us in 2 weeks.
Okay, so I took notes on everybody's answer. I'm going to try to put this together and get it to the Times Call, and all the goodness. And Gordon, I would love to know how to put a block party together. Like, do you know how to make that happen? Because I think there's a lot of blocks in Longmont, and I think everybody would love to have a party. I always say make a dance party, not war. That brings people together. So if you've got the answer, let me know, and we'll get it written up. Okay, great. Thanks for coming. We'll see you in 2 weeks, July 10th.